This morning we're starting with Ava and Lena, and they're going to talk to us about hydrogen-based reduction of iron oxide thin films studied by In Situ XPS. Thank you.
Hi everyone, welcome to our talk, to the first talk of the day. So my name is Lena, this is Eva, we are both from the Chair of Materials Chemistry in Aachen, Germany. And today we are going to talk about hydrogen-based reduction of iron oxide thin films studied by In Situ XPS. And what is the motivation behind this topic? So when we think about steel industry or iron industry, we think about a lot of carbon dioxide emission, and actually steel industry accounts for about 7% of global carbon dioxide emission, and the part of it is due to the fact when we want to produce iron, we have iron ores, and we have some reducing agent based on carbon, and then we obtain iron, but as a byproduct we also have carbon dioxide. So this is a conventional method for producing iron, but nowadays we think about some different reducing agent. So instead of using carbon, there's also the option to use hydrogen as a reducing agent, and therefore we have just the byproduct of water, and this is much friendlier for the environment. But here in this field there still have to be a lot of studies how to make it most efficient, and one thing is that iron ores often don't only consist of iron oxide, but also contain some tramp elements like, for example, alumina or silica, and we have the goal that we want to study the chemical effect of these tramp elements on the iron ore reduction with hydrogen. And this is the project that we are working on and the results we want to share with you today. So the overall project goal is here that we want to systematically investigate the chemical effect of tramp elements, and today we want to present the effect of silicon on the hydrogen-based reduction kinetics of iron oxide. And how do we do that? So we don't use iron ores because they are quite complicated, and also when we want to look at it with XPS, it's quite surface sensitive. It becomes relatively complicated because iron ores also consist of pores and cracks, which makes it a little bit difficult. So we say we create a model system, and therefore we do use sputter deposition to obtain thin films that consist on the mainly of iron oxide, but also some small doping concentrations of our tramp element. And in this first example, it was silicon that was added into the deposition. And afterwards, we do the reduction, and this is also kind of a model system of the hydrogen-based direct reduction as it is done in industry. So we model it kind of in our FlexiLog in our XPS chamber. So we have this gas inlet, so we can create an atmosphere of argon plus hydrogen. So we don't have pure hydrogen because it's can be quite dangerous, so we use a mixture, and then we heat up our model system of the thin film until 700 degrees C, and look at the reduction kinetics of our thin film, and analyze that without breaking the vacuum in our XPS analysis chamber. And what the first results of this project were is now presented by Eva.
To determine the extent of reduction, we have mainly looked at the iron 2p peaks. And this line corresponds to the thin films without any reduction experiments. And as you can see, it nicely corresponds to the iron 3 oxidation state peaks, and also the satellite one. After reducing it at a temperature of 700 degrees Celsius for 1 hour in argon and hydrogen atmosphere, you can see that a shoulder is formed here corresponding to the iron 2 oxidation state peak, and also the satellite is visible. Even a little peak for metallic iron is visible. Therefore, we have definitely reduced our sample. And as a reference, we have conducted the same experiment in just argon to see whether there are other effects influencing the experiment. And here is a small shoulder for the iron 2 oxidation state, meaning that we have a little bit of reduction. This could have many explanations, for example, thermal decomposition, or also due to adventitious carbon. As you can see here in the carbon peak, which has been reduced in its intensity quite a lot. So carbon might have had a reducing effect on the iron oxide thin film. However, if you compare the experiment with argon and hydrogen and just argon, you can see that we definitely had a reducing effect of the hydrogen. And so we know that the experiment works. We can see a reduction with hydrogen. Now we add some silicon into our sample. We have here a sample with 3 atomic % of silicon, which has a small shoulder here for the iron 2 oxidation state, but it is not as prominent as for the pure iron oxide sample. So silicon delays the reduction in an argon-hydrogen atmosphere, but to gain some further insights, we're going to look further at the silicon signal later. But first, let me show you the chemical composition that was determined by the survey spectra from the XPS data. And here we have in red the oxygen content and in yellow the iron content. As you can see beforehand, both samples were very similar. And afterwards, the sample that was heated up in argon has a lower iron content compared to the one that was heated in argon plus hydrogen. And here, for comparison, the one containing silicon. Beforehand, it was also very similar to the other ones, but afterwards there is a way higher oxygen to iron ratio. And as you can see here as a summary, the sample that was heated in argon has a percent decrease of 9% in oxygen, while the one that was heated in argon plus hydrogen has a 14% decrease. And the sample containing silicon has even an increase in 4% of oxygen. And now for the silicon,
yeah. We also had done a closer look at the silicon 2s signal. So the silicon 2p was unfortunately overlapping with the iron signal. But when we look at the silicon 2s signal, we can definitely see that there are some changes happening. So in black, we see before the heat treatment in the hydrogen atmosphere, and in red, we can see the signal afterwards. And from the survey spectra, we definitely see an increase in the silicon concentration. So it seems that silicon is moving towards the surface as we have this heat treatment in the hydrogen plus argon atmosphere. And we can also see a chemical shift towards higher binding energies, which means we have a higher oxidation state of silicon. So our interpretation would be that when we have the silicon doped iron oxide thin film that we form during the reduction process, the silicon oxide rich surface layer, which is inhibiting the reduction process. And coming back to the research question we defined in the beginning, so when we did the study of silicon and the influence on the hydrogen-based reduction kinetics, we can say that it has a negative influence. So we form the silicon oxide reduction barrier at the surface when we have this treatment of high hydrogen-based direct reduction at 700 degrees C. And with that, we are at the end of our talk. And if you have any questions or further idea on this topic, we are very happy to hear that from you. Thank you.